you surprised by this, Ross?
It's amazing. I'm a big fan of Tim over the years. He's made me and my clients a tremendous amount of wealth, and he's mostly done an excellent job. But, I've been calling for him to step down. It's been time for new blood at Apple. It's been time for change with AI and so much innovation in software that really Apple has fallen behind on, despite their hardware being so excellent.
Yeah.
This is a great move for Apple.
Yeah, and just to point out, I mean, you've got, if you were sort of at the start of Tim Cook's tenure, you got rich off this. We're talking like a $300 billion market cap. It's at $4 trillion. This has been a cash juggernaut, something that we talked about quarter after quarter. It's interesting, though, to see some of the parallels, though. I mean, Tim Cook, when he took over after Steve Jobs' illness, 50 years old, there were a lot of questions about whether he was the right guy for the job. And, certainly in terms of shareholder return, he was. And now Ternus is at 50, is going to face a lot of those same questions. I am curious as to how much faith you have in his ability based on what you know about him.
Well, I got a lot of faith in Gen Xers like myself taking over businesses. So, I think this is the right age to be tasked with this enormous responsibility, and I think it's a huge challenge, but it's like you got a guy with a great level of experience, and he knows the company and everybody internally well. He's got the hardware chops, but also the overall balance, and to really be potentially a great CEO. So, I've been around for so long. I remember the Steve Jobs days and the Scully days, and then the Steve Jobs days again. And then, when Tim Cook came over, there was a ton of doubt, about Tim. And I remember saying to my clients back then, like, you got to give this guy a chance. He's well trained. He wouldn't be doing this if he wasn't confident that this person could take Apple to the next level. And that's just what Apple actually needs to get to the next level. So, I'm excited about it. I do. I wish Tim well, and I think he's done a phenomenal job over the years. And a lot of my career was kind of built on the back of Apple, especially when I was younger. So, Apple's, just a real soft place in my heart. So I wish him luck. And as I said, I'm grateful for what he's done, but it's time for change, and I couldn't be happier about it.
Well, I'm interested to hear your thoughts on his background. You point out that he's a hardware guy. That has been the discussion around John Ternus. But, the point has been made that, it's hardware that that's the sandbox he's comfortable in. It's not necessarily software. It's not necessarily AI. But it sounds like you are very confident when you think about this next chapter that Apple needs to go to, that, he's the one to lead it.
Well, I trust the board, obviously, and Tim in making this decision, and I love that it's somebody inside Apple and not some outside CEO, because I always think that that's a much worse way to run a business. But that said, Apple is fundamentally a hardware company, and their position in AI right now is we're the gatekeeper. And if you want to run, Chat or Gemini, we don't care. You pay the $20 a month and it comes through Apple, and nobody, at Apple cares, taking the 30% off the top or whatever they make. So I think, for them, they know that with Google, they can get the best AI. Apple's never going to make AI better than Google at this point. And so they can really fill the software hole by getting closer with Google. But what they really need to do is they need to work on the hardware side, because they need to address like Meta and their glasses. Because I personally believe the next great AI product is glasses, and Meta's gone down the path, and the product's pretty good, but their AI isn't that good when you talk to the glasses and stuff.
Right.
But this is an area where Apple could just shine. They have better tech and better opportunity, and I do think the next big thing is that maybe we can get rid of phones and just use the Apple Watch with eyeglasses, and boy, so there's a lot of opportunity, and they do need to work on hardware.
And Ross, we only have about a minute left with you, but I do want to get your thoughts on, a topic that has been raised, that maybe under John Ternus, we're going to see a more acquisitive Apple. Is that something that you want to see?
Well, I've been hoping for that forever, and it's never been their way, and it's never been their way really for a long time. And what they always say is we make lots of small acquisitions, but we don't do anything big. But when I look into the landscape of the future, I don't think that that's what Apple needs to do to do well into the next decade. I think they really need to just lean in on their strengths and the fact they are a monopoly for hardware for most people, and how do we make our hardware even more valuable to people through integrating AI AI tools in an intelligent manner, because currently
Right.
Apple AI is just garbage.